Hello and welcome to Criminal Record, the Daily Record's weekly crime show. My name is Billy Gaddi and I'm joined by the Daily Record's crime reporter, Norman Silvester. He will take us through the big crime stories covered by the Record in the past few days. Norman, welcome to Criminal Record.
Thank you, Billy.
And we'll just get started. Last week, the Daily Record reported that the number of times armed cops were used by police on the streets of Scotland had increased 5 times in the last 10 years. Can you tell us more about that? And is this due to gangland violence we've seen in recent years? I understand some civil liberty groups have concerns as well.
Yes, it was last week, Billy. We told the story of really figures released by Police Scotland under Freedom of Information, and it was about armed deployments. Now, this is where we have at the moment we have around about 400, just over 400 police officers in Scotland, what are called authorised firearms officers, and we're used to seeing the armed cops maybe airports and in certain situations. But this is where the officers are being called to an incident, and they've actually pointed their guns. So this is where the guns have been fired, but the guns have been taken out of their wherever they're being held, heckler cocks, and then the guns are pointed at a particular individual to try and bring that individual under control. So they're either pointed at an individual or the technical term is presented to that individual. So that's where they've been deployed. So it's not just a question of armed cops being called to a scene and you see them carrying them. It's where they've been deployed, haven't been fired, but the guns have been pointed at a particular individual who's maybe a threat to the public or a threat to the officer. So we know that in the last 5 years, there's been an increase of, there was 23 deployments in the year 2021, and that last year that had risen to 119. So that's quite a substantial increase in the number of deployments, 5 times what it was 5 years ago. And we spoke to the Scottish Police Federation about this, and they were saying that they would like to see more firearms officers, they'd like to see more cops trained in the use of firearms. They'd like to see the number of authorised firearms officers increased. They say that's because increasing number of assaults on police officers, that police officers increasingly being in sort of threatening situations. Now that examples they gave, for example, was when a police officer threatened with a knife. They believe that that's a situation that would justify the deployment of a firearms officer. They also want to see a kind of what they call like a Norwegian model, whereby in Norway you have these patrol cars going about towns and cities, and they can be called on at any time by armed officers. They can go to the cars and then they can get hold of their firearms and attend an incident. So certainly the police would like to see more firearms deployments. What we do know is that the increased use of firearms and firearms officers is linked to police investigations into organised crime. Listeners to Criminal Record be familiar with the ongoing gangland war that we're seeing across Scotland between rival crime factions, in particular two Glasgow-based families. This has resulted in a number of arrests, probably the last 5 years in particular, various operations, Operation Engagement, Operation Escalade, which has been targeting members of the Daniel and Lyons crime family and others. That's resulted in a lot of arrests. A lot of these operations are linked to firearms. We know that a lot of the rival feuding organised crime groups are using firearms against each other. So that justifies the deployment of authorised firearms officers. So a lot of that increase will simply be cops going to incidents where the suspects are people maybe known with links to firearms, or they've been involved in sort of shooting incidents or firearm incidents. But I think that there also the concern is that if there's some other kind of incident, that the officers can attend them quickly. For example, we know in the 2022 up in the island, up in Skye, Finlay MacDonald went on the rampage with firearms. He killed one person and seriously injured 3 others. The Federation were concerned at the time that perhaps the ability of the police to react to these type of things. What happens if the firearms is in a remote area? Can the cops get to them more quickly? But I think that, to pick up your point earlier, that I think it's fair to say that the increased number of deployments is linked to this ongoing police operations against organised crime, which in turn involves a lot of firearms. When we ran the story, we also spoke to Amnesty International, the human rights organisation, and they were concerned the routine, what they would see as a routine deployment. They probably accept the fact that in exceptional circumstances, but they were concerned that there was firearms deployment was becoming more routine, and they talk about a need for more oversight, for more public engagement, for more independent scrutiny. And what we do know that every time a firearm is deployed, and again we're talking about a firearm being pointed at someone, that has been reported to the watchdog body PERC. So there is a bit of oversight, but the Amnesty International were concerned that perhaps these incidents were becoming too common. But it's definitely we're living in that era. We know the increased assaults on police officers is becoming an increasingly dangerous job. And I think the Federation see these firearms deployment as justified in that regard.
Elsewhere, I mean, our colleague Mark McGivern, he told of the plight of 18-year-old Lionel Neal from Balfron in Stirlingshire. He's banged up in a prison in Qatar for alleged drug dealing. It's alleged that he's been used as a drugs mule by a crime gang. He claims he was forced to carry a suitcase containing cannabis from Thailand to Dublin. But it was intercepted in Doha, where authorities have a zero tolerance on drugs. Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, this is a story about our colleague Mark McGivern. Quite a disturbing story, actually, case in many respects. Lionel Neal is from Balfron in Stirlingshire. He'd gone in early November with his girlfriend on a holiday to Thailand, and he was returning sort of mid-November, and had gone from, I believe, Bangkok to Doha Airport in Qatar en route to Dublin. And I think the plan was he would get a ferry back to the Scottish mainland, and his brother would meet him at Cairn Ryan down near Stranraer. So he's away on holiday, having a holiday with his girlfriend, and when he's going through the main airport at Doha and gets stopped, and he's told there's a consignment of quite a large amount of cannabis in his suitcase, he's arrested, held in a kind of cell with about 60 people, is eventually taken to the main kind of prison in Doha, where they take sort of drug smugglers, suspected drug dealers, and he's been there since mid-November. He's effectively been there for the last almost 2 months. Now he's only 18. His family are very distressed, are very concerned for his safety. They've taken on the sort of legal assistant of our campaign group detained in Dubai, who are helping him out with the sort of legal procedures there in a bid to try and get him released. But the backdrop seems to be that his mother has told the Daily Record that she is concerned, Mother Nicola, she's concerned that he's become entrapped, an organised crime group is kind of taking control of him, is effectively trafficking him. They've managed to persuade him or force him to take these drugs to go to Thailand and effectively act as a drugs mule and take the drugs back to the UK. Now, we don't know whether Lino actually knew there was drugs in the suitcase, but the suggestion is, or the allegation is, he's come under the control of an organised crime group. The mother has spoken about him receiving threatening phone calls when he was in Scotland. Lino phoned her when he was in Dubai to say he'd been getting threatening phone calls. There was an incident in Balfron where a kind of shadowy group of men turned up at the door in a car, didn't come in, but behaved in a kind of threatening, intimidating manner. The suggestion is he somehow got entrapped or involved in an organised crime group who were taking control of him, and effectively were using him as a drugs mule. Now, the argument is, and the legal people detained in Dubai say that effectively he's a victim, he's a kind of trafficking victim. He's been used by an organised crime group, a vulnerable teenager, and turned into a drugs mule. That really he's as much a victim as anyone and should be released and allowed back to the UK.
The Daily Record has also reported on the rising number of attacks on paramedics by members of the public when they're attending emergencies. It was quite shocking, I've got to say. I mean, why do you think this is happening?
This is probably one of the most shocking stories I worked on recently. Basically, Scottish Ambulance gave us some figures last week, and they were saying that last year, in the last financial year, so that's a period from April 2024 to March last year, that there have been 369 attacks on paramedics. They also include paramedics and call centre staff being verbally abused. So there's more than one incident a day, but the majority of incidents, 192 last year, were actual physical assaults on paramedics. Now that's when the paramedic it's called a 999 call, they go to an incident, could be anywhere, and the person who is perpetrating the assault is the person they're there to rescue now, or to give medical assistance to. So they're being sent out to help you and I, but the people that are being sent out to help are then carrying out assaults or verbally abusing them. Now, it seems to be most of these kind of incidents are alcohol related, so they're getting called out to situations where the person suffered an injury, they're drunk, they may be getting taken in the ambulance or they've been attended to at the scene, and then they're turning on the ambulance staff and carrying out assaults. Now, we had one example of a Drew Dodd, a paramedic based in the Borders. He was taking a man to a hospital in Edinburgh with a head injury. The man regained consciousness in the ambulance. He was drunk or had been drinking. He turned on Drew and punched him. So they then had to stop the ambulance, try and subdue the guy, and then take him to hospital. So this is this unbelievable situation where paramedics are trying to help you and I, but the people that they're trying to help are then turning on them, usually fueled by alcohol. There's also been other incidents where paramedics have been attending to people that are injured or needing medical assistance, and passers-by or people in the vicinity have carried out assaults as well. Again, alcohol linked. We also spoke with highlight the case of Araf Sadiq. He's been a paramedic for a number of years. He's based in Lanarkshire. He's been assaulted 5 times in the last sort of 10, 15 years. Suffered a dislocated shoulder, broken ribs, a dislocated knee, and in one case was off work for 4 months. So it's a terrible indictment of society and perhaps the alcohol abuse that we've got people turning on the people that are being paid to help them.
No, definitely. I mean, elsewhere on Saturday, we reported on the mystery disappearance of Kevin Maguire, who's been missing for more than 30 years, and plans for a new underwater search using the latest sonar technology. The police say they're still interested in information the public may have. You tell us more about this.
Yeah, this is probably, we could argue this is probably Scotland's most baffling missing person case. I'll just run through it quickly. Kevin Maguire was a 27-year-old joiner. He worked for the old Strathclyde Regional Council. He worked in their kind of water department, probably equivalent now would be called Scottish Water. He lived in a little village hamlet called Strona Clacker up in Stirlingshire, up near the Trossachs, quite not that far from Stirling itself, Aberfoyle, Callander, that kind of area. And he was recently married. He'd only been married 5 months, and he was in the house with his wife. They had a bit of an argument, they were a bit of dispute over whether they were going to spend Hogmanay New Year's Eve, and Kevin appears to have gone out the house, jumped in the car, and basically never seen again. His wife, the following day when he's not come back, he phones family members, discovers that he hasn't gone to see family members. Most of them are in Glasgow. She then reports him missing. The police at the time, this is, remember, 1994, 95, carried out quite a major search of there's lots of Loch Lomond's nearby, Loch Katrine, Loch Ard. There's lots of about half a dozen big waterways. And one of the suspicions was that he's driven out the house. The road conditions are icy at the time. He's maybe lost control of the car and skidded into one of the lochs or small inlets. But the police at the time did a lot of searches using quite up-to-date equipment at the time, and absolutely no luck, no joy. So it's been a bit of a mystery. There's been various reinvestigations over the years, further searches, but with no success. what we reported on Saturday was there's an organisation, a volunteer organisation called Beneath the Surface. They're based in Corley in Lancashire, and they've done a number of searches in the past for Kevin, and they're going to be doing a searches of various locks, probably Loch Katrine, Loch Lomond, and others, doing further searches for Kevin and his car. Now, this is another part of the mystery, because not only is Kevin missing, but his car is. He drove quite a distinctive Saab car, and that's never been found either. The search team seemed to think that if he is gone into the water, it would be within a reasonable radius of where he lived. He'd off the car, there would only be a limited amount of distance he could travel in the car. Perhaps once he's cooled off, maybe parked up, but maybe not had that opportunity if he's gone into the water. So it's a real mystery. Beneath the Surface have been involved in a number of successful searches recently for missing people. They've gone into the water. They're using the latest in sonar equipment that can search through the depths of 100 feet and more. So we can only just hope that this is successful. The police say they're still interested in information on Kevin and what may have happened to him. They took DNA samples from the family about 7 years ago and did searches at the time. So it's very much an active police investigation. We've got these new searches in April, May. We spoke to the family as well. We spoke to Kevin's mother, Annette, and they're so hopeful that one day they'll get the answers they're looking for, what happened to Kevin, and maybe a chance to finally lay him to rest.
Yep. And elsewhere, I mean, one crime that appears to be growing is romance fraud, where people are scammed having met on dating sites and apps. The Daily Record reported on Saturday how offences are up by 11% last year and more than 300 victims in the past 3 years. Can you tell us more about who's fallen victim and how people can avoid being scammed?
Yeah, romance fraud is a growing crime, and we've got some official figures. Action Fraud, they're the kind of national UK fraud organisation that take reports of fraud, then disseminate them to local police forces. So they were asked, how many cases of romance fraud or dating scams, and it's now a recognised crime, romance fraud. And they were saying in Scotland alone, there have been 306 cases in the last 3 years. As you say, an increase of 11%. There was 112 last year. And this is a growing crime. What basically happens is that people are increasingly, when they're looking for love or romance or a partner, they're doing through dating sites. There's a large number of them. People will be familiar, like the Tinder and what have you. And what's happening is a lot of con men, or con women for that matter, are setting up, in some cases, bogus identities, or maybe using their own identity, and they'll lure the person, get to know them through the dating app. They might meet, they might not meet. And one of the first things they'll do is try and scam money out of them. We focus on the case, for example, of Christopher Harkins. He was jailed in 2024 for 9 romance frauds against women, also a rape of a woman that he'd met online, and he's currently serving a 12-year prison sentence. And he scammed the 9 women out of more than £200,000. And one of the things he did, for example, he met a woman online. They'd met once, they got to know each other, and then he duped her into paying £3,500, allegedly as a deposit on a holiday, which she inquired further. She realised that the booking had never been made. So there's a lot of scams going on. Victims aren't the main women and the perpetrators men, but there's an increase nationally in the number of men that are falling victims, 7.5% increase. Overall, in Scotland, there was an 11% increase last year in romance fraud. In England, it's more, it's upwards of 40%. Interestingly, the age range is affected. So the majority of people that are falling victim are in the 40 to 60 age group, which maybe makes sense. People do coming back on the dating market after the breakup in marriages. A smaller number in the kind of 20 to 40, and about 11% of victims are over the age of 70. So we know that a lot of dating sites are aimed at older people as well. So it really is one of these crimes. It doesn't matter whether you're 18 or 80, you could fall victim. And I think the message is, when you meet people online, to take care. it maybe feels a lot safer. Try where possible to meet the person. You shouldn't in any circumstance be sharing money or giving them loans. A lot of people that other people will meet online will give sob stories about the Christopher Harkins case. The guy posed as a businessman. People quite often will maybe have sob stories about they're running out of money. Can you help them out? Or alternatively, if they're posing as business people, they'll say, "I've got a really good investment for you. Do you fancy investing a few £1,000 in this?" And we know that it might not sound a lot of money, but for a lot of the people who are going these sites, maybe quite vulnerable, who's come out of a broken marriage or relationship. So maybe their first time in the back in the dating game, maybe the first time they've used a dating app. And I think there's an illusion because it's online and you can see a photograph of the person and you can message each other. It's maybe safer than the old way where you maybe met in a bar or a restaurant or through work. But there's no doubt that this is a growing crime. Another issue that Action Fraud raised was that this could only be the thin edge of the wedge. A lot of people perhaps too embarrassed to report the case. For every person that is scammed, there might be others who are simply too embarrassed to come forward. And interestingly, there was, I can't remember the exact figure, there was quite a number of people that took part in the Action Fraud survey, or the Action Fraud survey didn't disclose whether they were male or female, so we don't know whether it's more women or more. And we know it's more women that are falling victim, but it could be that men are increasingly falling victim beyond the 7.5%. Maybe particularly men are more embarrassed about coming forward. So very much a growing crime, and maybe we're only just the tip of the iceberg.
No, definitely. And all this sort of brings on to today's front page splash, which was on police fearing that crooks could get away after officers were told they can't pursue suspects in their squad cars because of new strict safety rules. Can you talk us through these rules and sort of what it means?
Yeah, this was a story we had today. It was a front page story by our colleague Marcello Mega. Basically, as we all know, part of policing is if you see a suspect, you're in a police car, you give chase. Quite often you sometimes see this in the streets of Glasgow or Edinburgh across Scotland. Obviously, the police chase has been fictionalised in TV programmes and movies. So we're familiar with the concept of the police chase, where police officers in a car give chase to a suspect, and that suspect could be carried out any manner of a crime, serious and not so serious. Normally, officers, when they get trained in the use of a police car, will get some sort of pursuit training as part of that kind of overall training program. But what's happened is that the police have introduced a new training program. It's it's called initial pursuit training, and this is to give the police a bit of legal protection. If there's any accidents or any incidents, the officer's protected because he's had this training. But this is a 3-day training program that the officers must participate in. The problem then is if they've not participated in this training program, theoretically they're not able to give pursuit. So unless you've done this 3-day initial training program, this new training program, which teaches the basics of police pursuit, then you're not qualified to carry out a pursuit. So it means in theory an officer who's not done the training, if there is a requirement for him to give chase or her to give chase in a particular incident, they can't do so. They would have to then inform other colleagues who were qualified to do so, who could then give pursuit. And that might be too late. It might be the robber or the guy that's just assaulted someone is getting away because that police officer is unable to give pursuit because he or she have not had the proper training. A suggestion is we really need a bit of common sense here. That maybe it's a case of officers who are trained, who've not had this new training, maybe being wrapped up in red tape and not being allowed to do their job, which is basically go out and catch the crooks.
Well, thank you, Norman, for joining us today, and thanks to our audience for tuning in to Criminal Record.
Thank you, Billy.
If you have any questions for the team, you can email reporters@dailyrecord.co.uk with the subject line Criminal Records. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can subscribe to listen to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts by searching Criminal Record. or you can watch it each week on our YouTube channel. Thanks very much for watching.